What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Cooking with Clams. I'm Will, and I'm not in Key West. I am not in New York. I am in Ireland. Came out here with my sister, my mom, and my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law has family here, Jack. I'll introduce all of them in a little bit, but we're gonna do a lot while we're here, and hopefully I can show you a lot of what we're doing. We're kicking it off today, doing a little bit of foraging for seaweed and abalone. We're gonna meet up with a woman that's gonna show us everything that we need to know. So let's get the adventure started.
Useful to know, at least, I don't want to give blanket statements, but it's useful to know that there's no real poisonous seaweed as there are mushrooms. So you kind of can take a risk if you feel like it. I'm going to qualify that a little bit and just say it is important the environment that you're getting your seaweed from, because seaweeds will absorb what's in the seawater. So if there are heavy metals, for example, that'll get absorbed by the seawater or by the seaweed. If there are if there's agricultural runoff or sewage ending up in the water, that will be absorbed by the seaweed as well. So you just want to be aware of the environment that you're getting your seaweed from. Unfortunately, in Ireland, we're a small country with a small population, but we still have very backwards infrastructure when it comes to treating our sewage. So it's not a very nice conversation to be having, but it's just something to be aware of. So the EPA website, they would keep an eye on the water quality around the country. And so yeah, if you're tempted while you're traveling around, I just check that out, because you could be in a rural area and think like, oh, there's nobody around here, but there could be bad water quality there. So it's just something it's very sad that that's the reality that we live in now, but you don't want to get sick. So
Okay, so we are here with Sinead O'Brien. And this is, well, tell us where we are.
Okay, so we're down on the shore here in Rossaville, just behind our aquaculture farm that goes under the name Mungo Murphys. So I guess we'll start, I'll point out this seaweed first. You might have seen this on your coastline. I don't know, do you recognize it from Massachusetts? So this is called Fucus spiralis, and I'll just give you a look of it. So it has this kind of spiraled, twisted effect on the frond. So it's all edible. It's just I'm not particularly interested in this part, because it's fine, but it doesn't have a huge amount of flavor. What I like are these pods, which you're welcome to grab for yourselves. I call them sea capers. Oh, yeah. And you can pickle them as well, but they are, they have a briny flavor already from the seawater.
Going.
So these pods, they emerge over the summer, I suppose, as the water is warmer, because this is how they reproduce from. As we get into the autumn, winter, these pods will all be gone, because they'll have done their reproduction job. And so then you'll just be left with the frond, which, as I say, is edible. It's just on its own, it's not that exciting. So yeah. What do you think? Do you get a?
I love the crunch.
It has a good texture.
Yeah.
Now these might have been out of the water for a little bit, so they're not as moist as they can. Yeah, they're not as briny as they can be. But yeah, they're not too bad.
The limpet's what I pointed out earlier.
Yeah, just when they're usually here, they're very well camouflaged. They're the limpets. So these, to be honest, I don't know how they'd even pry them off. You need a tool, or at least there's a trick in splashing it with water, so then it starts to release, and then you have to be really quick in pulling them off. But so that they subsist on these kind of foraged seafood ingredients. And then when Ireland, I suppose, I don't want to say became more economically advanced, but as the economy progressed and people had a bit more money, people really just turned their back on the sea. And this was all considered poverty food. It was considered, I suppose, fish was always eaten on a Friday as a penance. So it had negative connotations. It was all suffering, basically. And so because of that, we just really didn't develop or continue with that seafood culture. And so a lot of our seafood became exported. So a lot of the fish was sent to France and the Netherlands. increasingly our crab is being sent to China. And so it's getting to the point where actually there are more crab pots. See those little buoys, those like floating buoys? There are more crab pots than actual crabs around the Irish coastline because of overfishing. And it's been so poorly managed because, yeah, when there's money involved, people I guess, nobody really cares about the future, I suppose. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate that we've just lost that whole culture and we just don't value any of the stuff that's here. So when it comes to yeah, and so I guess you were saying that you had your husband's family came from this area, and a lot of people emigrated from this region. And so back in the 1940s, a couple of guys got together and they approached the state and said, we need to set up a factory here to stop people from emigrating because they were losing so many, it was breaking up families, and they wanted to try and just set up an industry that would help people to, make a life to live out here. Yeah. And so they set up a factory in Kilkieran, which is just deeper into Connemara, and that's where they started processing seaweed. So they had a lot of traditional seaweed harvesters who would then sell their seaweed to the factory, and then from there, I guess what they did was they burnt the seaweed there, and then they sent the ash to Scotland for iodine extraction. So it was again it was the start of it, but we still didn't really add value to the resource here. It was always set, and that's always kind of been the case, is we just sell our resources cheap and then have it at the value added somewhere else.
Oh, and you got a jellyfish, a moon jelly.
Yeah, there are jellyfish coming in these days. So, this is a small little sample, but I can bring it up maybe to your mom as well. Just to show. So if you're from Massachusetts, you might be familiar with this seaweed. No, it looks very small at the moment because it's not the best time of year for it.
I've seen that.
You've seen this?
I have seen that.
So
before.
this is kind of bleached out by the sun now, but the natural color is this more darker, this reddish brown color down there. But this is called Carrageen moss. But I think in the States you call it Irish moss. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the reason it's called Irish moss is because an Irish guy emigrated and landed in Massachusetts, and he found, oh, this is like in Ireland, and just called it Irish moss. But it's very traditional in Ireland, because it's used for making cough syrups. So it got the nickname the poor man's doctor. So if you had a congestion in your chest, you take this in a hot drink, and it would just help to act as an expectorant, basically, to clear out your congestion. It was also used for making puddings and jellies. So Carrageen moss pudding is a very traditional recipe where this is boiled up in milk and then let set into this jelly. And a lot of people have bad memories of it because I suppose in the olden days, not a lot of flavor was added. So it's just kind of this sea flavored milky jelly.
Like medicine and
exactly, yeah. But nowadays, a lot of chefs have worked on the recipes, and it's now kind of a delicacy. So yeah, it tastes much better. Ballyvaughan is, I suppose, more touristy. It's kind of more artistic and this, that kind of vibe.
They were calling it Bali Vegas.
Bali Vegas.
When we are
this plant here.
No.
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 Or even the seeds. I'll pass that up. Does anyone do gardening?
What do you think? They're kind of like a succulent.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna pass these up. Whoops.
I mean, if there were more prominent.
There you go.
What is this?
So this one, I'll get to this plant in a second.
This looks like
Sorry.
spinach.
Yes! Well
Is it?
done.
Oh, it looks like spinach.
It's sea spinach. Yeah.
Sea
So it's a
spinach.
very waxy, thick, kind of succulent texture because it's absorbing a lot of salt. And actually, what we know today as spinach and beetroot were bred from these kind of wild varieties. So that the seeds, they remind me of beetroot seeds as well. I don't know if you've ever...
See, I've never grown beets.
Okay, yes.
I've grown spinach.
Yeah.
So that, the leaves, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
But this...
well spotted. A lot of people...
So is the entire plant edible?
Yes, it is. So yeah, go for it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Super crispy.
I have the
Crunchy.
leaves.
Yeah, the leaf is good.
A little tangy.
Oh, salty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good. It's salty, but there's kind of a sweetness to
I'll
it as
trade
well.
you.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Because I'm not tasting the saltiness. I'm tasting the sweet. We all have different taste buds.
Yeah.
I'm tasting salty.
I like the leaves.
I like the leaves too.
Yeah, it's really good. This is called sea radish, and the whole plant is edible. So you can eat the flowers, the leaves, the leafy part, and the seed pods. But if you're going for the seed pods, I just recommend going for the youngest kind, like the kind of more limey green colored ones, because as they mature, they just go more tough, and so it's just not very
Yeah, here's
nice.
one that's probably been
That's a bit
around for
old.
while,
yeah, you can try that one.
Crunchy and juicy.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that tastes like a radish. It's spicy.
Here's a nice young one as well. Here you go.
Oh, that's crazy good.
Oh, but that
I got a spice.
is whoa,
Yeah, it is spicy.
strong. Yeah. Wow, I'm so unexpected.
Wow.
So if you thought the pod was spicy, the leaf is even spicier.
Really?
yeah. Let me see if I can get a good.
It's leaving-
sample.
It's like mustard.
Yeah, exactly.
Like mustard greens.
This is the leaf there. You can see they have these kind
It
of.
looks like mustard greens.
It does. It really does.
Okay.
That also looks like a radish leaf.
Yeah.
You okay?
So this one, I like to just chop it up and saute it in a pan with a bit of onion and a bit of oil, and then you can mix that up into yogurt, and it makes a really nice sort of radish dip. On its own, it's a bit much. I didn't actually see the seaweed on the shore. This is the kelp. So you might be familiar with this one from your coastline. The Laminaria digitata. This grows in abundance off the coast here, and we get it delivered to us every other week by a local seaweed harvester. So basically we follow the low tide. When it's a low tide week, he goes out, cuts it for us, and then we store it in this tank just so that it's easily accessible for us, and also it gives us a chance to clean it off in case there's any crab or starfish or anything, because those would be predators to the abalone, so we don't want those to get into the tank. So it just means that when we're taking it out of here and putting it into our baskets to then distribute it into the boxes, we can just check for those things. So the abalone are actually light sensitive, so that's why we have these covers over their boxes, because we don't want them to get too exposed to the light. And then this was the seaweed in there. You can actually see where they've been eating. They have these little radula that scrapes the surface of the kelp, and they kind of just break it down slowly. And then here, oh, can you see there are more on this side? Let me just shift it around. There's more on the bottom as well, but these are what came up. Yeah. So they're, as I said, they're light sensitive. So they're like, oh, get me out of this light. So the species that we have growing here is a Japanese species. So this is the Haliotis discus hanai. It's not actually native to Ireland. They were brought over in the 1980s because a Japanese scientist had he visited to the west of Ireland and found that the environment here is very similar to that of Japan, where these natively grow. And so from there, the university in Galway have a research lab in Carna in Connemara, and so they brought over the Japanese species and the European species, which is commonly found around Brittany in France. And so they started studying their life cycle and different growing methods, and then from there several different abalone farms emerged in Ireland, and then this was the last farm to be built, and it's now the only abalone farm left in Ireland, and it's the only abalone farm in Europe with the Japanese species.
And your mother.
Yes, yeah, she had the crazy idea to set it all up. So, but it's a bit strange now because, as I said, they are originally from Japan, and we get a lot of Japanese visitors and Chinese visitors, and they tell us we've been hearing recently that unfortunately Japan's seawater hasn't dropped below 15 degrees Celsius in the last few years. And so that's caused a lot of problems for their seaweed because the seaweed is starting to die off. And then that's, as a result, having problems for the abalone because the kelp is their main source of food. And so without their source of food available, they're starting to disappear. So they're becoming quite endangered due to the environmental factors that have changed. And that's one of the things, like with climate change, I think the environment is changing much more quickly than things can adapt. And so I know in Ireland, this is considered a non-native species, or it's not invasive because it's not actually in the sea. But I think there's a bit of a reluctance to accept it as something that we should be growing because it's not originally from here. But it's very happy here, and it's something that we should really be looking at more because in Ireland, our environment is going to change as well. And so, you might have, we are already seeing warming seawater temperatures in the summertime and into the winter. So we need to be looking at species that can handle just a broader temperature range, basically. Okay, so to do the spawning, we basically get 2 buckets. It's really not rocket science. You get 1 bucket filled with females, another bucket filled with males, and you have seawater in both. And then you raise the seawater temperature to 2 degrees above the ambient temperature that we're working with in our tanks. And so let's say it's 16 degrees Celsius, we'll get that to 18 degrees Celsius, and that triggers a heat shock in the abalone. So you're creating an existential crisis for them to want to reproduce. And so the females will release the eggs, the males will release the sperm, and then in our hatchery we have these kind of taller buckets or tanks, again filled with seawater, and you just combine the liquid from each of the buckets into that tank. And then we come in the next morning and check, we just take a little water sample to look under the microscope to see have the eggs been fertilized. And with the Japanese species, 9 times out of 10 fertilization is successful. So it was another reason why Mom focused on the Japanese species, because she just had such good success in getting them to reproduce. With the European species, 9 times out of 10 they were not successful, so that's why we kind of forgot about them. From the day that we can see that they've been fertilized, it's 5 days from that point before we pour the larvae into our settlement tank, because by that 5th day they'll have developed a little microscopic foot and little microscopic eye spots, so that they can then swim and attach themselves onto the plates and then just stick on and then crawl around and graze on the microalgae that will be coating these plates until they're big enough for us to pick them off.
Very deep color. There's no shiny shell there, so they're growing really well.
Yeah. Thank you.
And if it were a male, it'd be kind of a beigey color. So she's about 6.5 centimeters. The more mature ones are better to use, like if you're 7 to 8, 9, 10 centimeters or better. Okay, so the abalone breathe through these holes, they excrete and they spawn through these holes. You'll only have about 3 or 4 holes open at a given time. She's going to add her next hole here, her next, they grow on this end. Their head is right here. You can see right there.
Yeah,
and 1 antenna here and 1 on the other side. And the only hard bit is the radula, which helps them to eat the seaweed. Okay, so they breathe, they excrete, they spawn through those holes. So you get buckets, and we're coming into the spawning season now. Males in a bucket, females in a bunch of different buckets. We raise the temperature of the water. Females begin to spawn through those holes first, and then we fertilize the eggs. We put them in an egg tray, they hatch out overnight, and they're swimming larvae for 5 days. Which is great, because if it were a sea urchin or a sea cucumber, that could be up to 20, 28 days. It's a longer time. When the larvae have 2 little eye spots, so when you see the little eye spots on their foots looking to settle on a substrate, we're ready to put them in the settlement tanks. And in the back, the settlement tanks, we're already getting the diatoms growing, the benthic diatom. So the benthic diatoms are there on the plates. We pour in the larvae on that 5th day. They'll settle within about 3 days, and then they're grazing until they're about 10 mils in size. After that, when they're 10 mils in size, we pick them off the plates and we wean them onto the laminaria, the kelp. And you see the weaning trays there, they're flat. We lay the seaweed at the bottom, we put the abalone seed there, they'll just kind of eat away. The cones are there because they start getting light sensitive at that point. And they just remain there for another 6 months until they're about 20 mils in size. And then we move them over to the grow out tanks, which are those blue tanks. In the black boxes, because again, they're light sensitive. So they like to go down to the bottom, and then when they have the food, they go up and they eat and they go back down again. And that's the life of an abalone. There it's out. So the gonad is there, the viscera, the intestines, all on their side. This can be used in a soup stock. There's an abalone farm that does tuberculata in France, and they sell that to the face cream company. And there's the radula there, so that's just what helps them to eat their food. And then everything else we eat. The shell can be used, again, in face powders. You can grind it up and use it as a calcium supplement for chickens or for humans. And then they use that in like guitar frets and furniture inlays and all that stuff. So that's the abalone life. The end of this one.
Well, just some carrot, a bit of ginger and garlic, and a very Asian-inspired dressing. So it's just been blanched because you remember from the rock it was very tough.
Yep.
So we just boiled the kettle, hit it with the hot water, just let it sit for a bit so that it just helps to tenderize it a bit. So I'll leave you to enjoy.
Thank you.
I don't know if you guys got introduced this episode, but that's my sister Jen and Mom Clams. Out there's Jack. He doesn't want to be on camera. So she said just a little bit of ginger and soy. So that's got carrot.
And carrot. Oh my god.
Ooh. That's really good. Really crunchy.
It's good. That's fun. Like chewing.
So we're doing a little bit of the seaweed. I think we're gonna do some abalone tasting. Some of the stuff she showed us to forage, I'm gonna grab a little bit, and then hopefully in the next episode catch some fish or get some oysters or something, and we'll make something with some of the plants that we forage.
Food at you.
What is this?
So this is a sea lettuce tempura. So we have the ulva in a beer batter and then just fried it and then sprinkled some of our own seaweed seasoning blend on top.
Oh my gosh.
So it's seaweed on seaweed.
That's so beautiful.
So the ulva, we didn't actually see that on the shore because it likes to grow a little bit deeper in the tide. So when the tide is out and you can get into the tide pools, that's where it grows. So it grows in some of our deeper tanks. And we're trying to cultivate it better using the outflow from the abalone so that we can, scale up the production of this particular type.
That is so good.
So that tempura seaweed with seaweed powder on top. That was pretty good. That's really good. It's salty, crunchy, chewy. It's got everything. These are good. I should have asked her if we could go in the kitchen and watch them cook some of this stuff. That was a mistake, but you guys are just going to have to take my word for it. We'll figure this out and do it in another episode. We'll definitely recreate some of these things because they are very good.
So, what you have there is a corn tortilla with sea spaghetti, and then some of the lettuce that you saw growing over there, and then a salsa, which is a bit of cheese and a nice yogurt mix with the cooked abalone on the side.
Beautiful.
So the abalone was just sliced up thinly and then flash cooked in a pan in a hot skillet with a bit of oil. So nothing else is added. So the flavor is the abalone that you're getting. And a lot of that flavor comes from their seaweed diet, because this is something I've learned over the years, that we've gotten so many people who are used to eating abalone back in China, and they always are shocked when they taste it and they're like, what did you add to this? And I say nothing, like it was just flash cooked in a skillet with a bit of oil and they're like, okay, it tastes so, like it tastes like something. Because I think part of the problem in China is because it's become so mass produced. A lot of the time they're not feeding it seaweed, and so then the flavor is missing. It's the whole reason why it was celebrated is now lost because it's become mass produced and being fed alternative feeds. So yeah, it's interesting.
That's not what I pictured at all. Like
The
the
abalone?
texture and the taste.
Yeah.
Like, it's not fishy. I thought it would be fishy. It's meaty. It has a nice texture. And she's right. I mean, it tastes like the seaweed that we ate.
Ooh,
Do you want to try? No?
It's got a great texture.
it is good.
Yeah.
And you never ate this with Grandpa?
I don't think I did. And if I did, it wasn't like this.
No, it was covered in tomato sauce. it was obliterated.
Today, so.
And that's all seaweed, lettuce, cheese. So it's not vegan. But wow.
It's so good.
And the yogurt kind of acts as sour cream. It's actually, that's very good. That's very good. Yeah, we're gonna talk to this girl about some recipes and try to recreate some of these things. But this is very, very good. I want to show you. I don't know if I got a really good shot of the abalone shell, but check this out. Pretty cool. So we're gonna finish eating. This is just the beginning of the Irish adventure. Adventures in Ireland. But hopefully we'll do some fishing, we'll do some more foraging. I think we're gonna go see an oyster farm. We got a lot of things planned, so I hope to get some of it to you guys. I know this wasn't a regular episode, I didn't do any cooking in it, but it was a lot of really interesting information. And one of the things I like to do when I go to a new place is find out mostly about the food, because food tells you a lot about the culture of a place. What people eat when they were in poverty, what people eat when they have money, so on and so forth, what people ate to survive. Tells you a lot about culture of a place. So it is interesting. And this was a good start to the trip. So we will see you on the next episode. If you like this episode, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.